Good morning to you. This is Sunrise. Top stories today: failed fire safety tests on tower blocks across the country. The government says all 34 high-rise buildings tested so far have failed the tests as thousands of people evacuated in North London spent a second night in temporary accommodation. More pressure for the Prime Minister as the Archbishop of Canterbury calls for a cross-party commission to deal with Brexit. And we're not dinosaurs. The leader of the DUP in Westminster says critics of the party shouldn't fear its influence on the government.
Also this morning on Sunrise, Moscow's pin-up pensioners, the modelling agency helping to shake up the conservative world of Russian fashion. And in sport, after defeat to the All Blacks, the Lions consider their options for Tuesday's tour match.
Good morning to you. We're starting Sunrise with the government saying all 34 high-rise blocks tested across the country in the light of the Grenfell Tower tragedy have failed fire safety tests. The Communities Secretary, Sajid Javid, made the announcement as around 3,000 people from the Chalcots estate in North London spent a second night in temporary accommodation. Now, 4 of the towers there were evacuated on Friday evening. There has been criticism of Camden Council's handling of that situation. That criticism is continuing today. Some people are still refusing to leave their homes. Laura Bundock reports.
Carrying bags and belongings, residents from the evacuated towers gradually moved out.
Now the Archbishop of Canterbury has added to the pressure on the Prime Minister, calling on Theresa May to set up a cross-party commission to advise her on Brexit.
Justin Welby has compared the current situation to the world wars when Britain was run by coalitions and says a cross-party approach would take some of what he calls the poison out of the debate.
Well, let's slide now to Westminster and our correspondent Charlotte Lomas. And this is causing these comments a bit of a stir, Charlotte.
Yes, Rebecca, it's bound to infuriate some Conservatives this morning, with the Archbishop Justin Welby raising the question whether other parties should have their say on Brexit. He's called upon Theresa May, the Prime Minister, to appoint a cross-party commission which could advise on UK's withdrawal from the EU in an article that he's written for the Mail on Sunday. In that, he contrasts the communities that have come together in wake of the Grenfell fire with what he says is the country's fierce differences and divisions on Brexit. And he also, as you mentioned there, does compare the current situation with the 2 world wars when Britain was run by a coalition. And this was a point that was picked up on by the former Business Secretary, the Lib Dem MP Vince Cable, as he was speaking to us here on Sky News a little earlier on.
We're not talking about killing people, and in that sense the analogy with war is not right. But in terms of the sheer scale of what was involved, I mean, we're talking about years and years of Parliament being tied up with this issue, and a lot of very, very big concerns which are connected with our long-term future. You know, how do we make the economy more productive so that we can raise wages? I mean, this has all been shelved. You know, we're not talking any longer about, you know, how do we raise the skill level of the population? How do we get more science and innovation? That's what we should be focusing on. It's all been put in the background because of the overriding preoccupation with Brexit, and that is very unhealthy.
Okay.
Now, this is a significant intervention, adding more pressure on Theresa May and her minority government, and adds to previous calls from Labour MPs, including Yvette Cooper and Harriet Harman, calling for more cross-party cooperation. And we also know from a recent YouGov poll that was taken place last month that 51% of voters also in favour of more cross-party cooperation as well.
OK, Charlotte, thanks very much for that update there.
Now, the DUP's leader in Westminster says those who hold different views on social issues like gay marriage and abortion have no reason to fear the party's influence on government.
Well, Nigel Dodds, who's been negotiating a confidence and supply agreement with Downing Street, has told Sky News he and his colleagues have been misrepresented as dinosaurs. He's been speaking to our Ireland correspondent, David Blevins.
With the vote on the Queen's speech looming, all eyes were back on the kingmakers, the DUP's Conservative stance on gay marriage and abortion. David Blevins, Sky News in Belfast.
So Sophie Ridge on Sunday is up at 10 o'clock, not long till that. This week she's joined by the former Chancellor Ken Clarke, International Development Secretary Priti Patel, Labour MP Stella Creasy and Labour peer Shami Chakrabarti. Good line up there.
Now, more than 120 people have been killed in an oil tanker explosion in Pakistan. Officials say the tanker overturned on a highway near Bahawalpur and exploded as people tried to collect the leaking oil. 80 others were injured.
UNICEF and the World Health Organization say Yemen has been hit by the worst cholera epidemic in the world. More than 1,300 people have died in the last 2 months, with 200,000 cases in total. The UN says the country's health, water and sanitation systems are collapsing. That's after 2 years of civil war.
118 people are still missing after a village in southwest China was buried by a huge landslide. Only 3 survivors have been found. 15 bodies have been recovered. Heavy rain caused the side of a mountain to collapse yesterday morning.
Now, how do police forces that are already stretched and subjected to cuts cope with large-scale protests?
Well, 2 rival demonstrations took place in Birmingham yesterday, one by Britain First, the other by Unite Against Fascism. Tom Parmenter was given rare access to West Midlands Police Silver Command and to officers on the ground.
This summer just isn't letting up.
Ross, appreciate your thoughts this morning. Thank you.
OK, thanks.
Now, still to come on Sunrise.
Let's have a look at the sport this morning.
Over on Sky Sports News HQ, and we're back with more later this morning.
Brought to you by Vitality for your health and life insurance.
Now, it's not been a great weekend weather-wise. Joe, is there any sunshine on the horizon?
There's some. It's mostly in the north and it's quite a bit cooler there. The milder weather is still in the south, but here we've got lots in the way of cloud and really things are looking quite unsettled over the next few days.
From 12:30.
Good morning to you. This is Sunrise.
We'll be getting stuck into the debate of the day. How has Theresa May coped over the past week?
First for you, though, in the wake of the Grenfell Tower fire and the evacuation of 4 high-rise buildings in Camden, councils have been accused, as we've heard quite vocally from a lot of the residents, of not making things clear enough, not stepping in to help quickly enough. Let's talk to Public Relations Specialist Andrew Teacher, who's here. It has raised some very big questions here, hasn't it? I mean, particularly with Grenfell, as to how people were being dealt with, what information was being passed to them. Why have things gone so wrong? Is it just that everyone was caught unawares, that this was just something nobody was prepared for?
That seems to be the case. I think the main thing that we should have seen here is a much quicker a more decisive response from the Prime Minister. We should have seen Cobra convene, as was the case with the floods, as has been the case with all sorts of disasters over the years, back to the miners' strikes in the 70s. And that would mean that councils would not have to deal with this themselves. Local councils aren't equipped to deal with major crises like this. They should have better plans in place. The communication should be better, but they need support. And that's what we haven't seen so far.
I mean, what I don't understand is how have these tower blocks, there's so many up and down the country, how have they been allowed to have this cladding on them for all this time and it's not safe?
Well, I think this is a question for successive governments because, I mean, these things would have had to, at some point, have complied with building regs. They would have had to have had somebody with a clipboard gone along, tick it off and say it's safe. We obviously saw the Chancellor last week tell Andrew Marr that the cladding on Grenfell was not safe and not legal under current rules, but that seemed a little bit preemptive of studies that were being done on the building. But regardless of all that, I think safety does have to come first, and it's important, though, that we deal with people properly, that we're communicating properly with people and that we're really sensitive to the situations these are in, and it's not just a case of shuffling dominoes around. These are human beings with families, with jobs, with relatives, and I think we're just doing a terrible job at the minute supporting them. But
I don't quite get what you said earlier on when you said, local councils aren't prepared for this. They need to be backed up. Well, these are local government issues, and it is local government.
Well, no, this is a national crisis. Let's be clear. When we've got 600 buildings across the country,
it's not in the sense of when these are happening in different local authority areas, and it's those local authorities who then have to step in and say, we need to get you out and we need to rehouse you, and that's all their responsibility. Now, they're getting support from from central government, but these are local government issues. They need to be across this.
But this is a special situation. These won't be costs that have been budgeted for. These won't be things that happen on a daily basis. I think we've seen in the papers today Sajid Javid, the Community Secretary, saying that councils will get support. But what I think we need to be doing, and you guys need to be challenging ministers on this, is getting an unequivocal commitment that central government will pay for this, because...
Well, they've already said that. They've already said that.
Have they said they'll support it, or have they said they will actually pay for it? Because the two aren't the same.
No, they've basically said they're going to pay for it, haven't they?
Well,
because there's no way otherwise. It's going to cost Camden Council £500,000 in hotel fees, which, you know, they just won't have spare in the budget.
Yeah. I mean, look, I agree with you. The councils have done a shocking job dealing with this, and to be telling people in the evening, as has been reported, is not the way to do it. But ultimately, we have to trust in fire experts through this process. And to some degree, you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. Because if we were to see a repeat situation, you know, when the first Malaysia Airlines flight disappeared a few years back, people thought, oh, well, that will never happen again. But it did, you know, not long after. And I think we just need to be aware that if there are serious issues with these buildings, they need to be dealt with. But look, what we're seeing here, this is the manifestation of growing anger over decades, over inequality that's largely been precipitated by housing being made political. We've had housing used to buy votes effectively for decades, from right to buy through to help to buy. And the result of that has been growing inequality in our society. And these tower blocks that often are social housing residences, these are the icons of this unfairness, of this disparity between rich and poor. And somewhere like Camden, much like Kensington, is got these extremes of extreme poverty and extreme wealth, literally side by side each other. And I think what we need to do is take housing out of politics and deal with things across the board in a cross-party situation. OK,
Andrew, you've got to leave it there. Thank you.
The Archbishop of Canterbury has added to the growing pressure on Theresa May by calling for the government to set up a cross-party commission to advise her on Brexit. Justin Welby compared the current situation to the two world wars when Britain was run by coalitions, and says a cross-party approach would take some of what he calls the poison out of the debate.
The DUP's leader in Westminster says those who hold different views on social issues like gay marriage and abortion have no reason to fear the party's influence on government. Nigel Dodds has been negotiating a confidence and supply agreement with Downing Street and has told Sky News he and his colleagues have been misrepresented.
Those are cultural and social issues, but they're devolved issues which will be dealt with at a local level. They will not intrude, and we have never intruded them, in terms of the Westminster Parliament or the rest of the United Kingdom. So nobody has anything to worry about in that.
More than 120 people have been killed in an oil tanker explosion in Pakistan. Officials say the tanker overturned on a highway and exploded as people tried to collect the leaking oil. Another 80 people were injured.
UNICEF and the World Health Organization say Yemen has been hit by the worst cholera epidemic in the world. More than 1,300 people have died in the last 2 months, with 200,000 cases in total. The UN says the country's health, water and sanitation systems are collapsing after 2 years of civil war.
Israel's released footage of its planes hitting targets in Syria in response to 10 projectiles landing in its territory. They say no one was harmed in the operation, which marked a rare case of Israeli involvement in the Syrian civil war that has now got into its seventh year.
A week is a long time in politics. It's one of those old catchphrases which is proving to be ever more true at the moment. It's been quite a week for Theresa May. The Queen's speech, of course, had to be watered down. We've had the outrage growing over the Grenfell Tower disaster, and of course now, with what we've seen in Swiss Cottage as well, we've got the ongoing talks with the DUP as she tries to sort out that sort of deal. So what is she making of things at the moment? Is she making a hash of it all, or is she just getting her head down and carrying on? Let's talk to Conservative commentator Joanne Nadler, who's here, and in a Westminster studio, Peter Edwards from Labour List. Morning to you both. Joanne, it has been a tough week.
Absolutely.
We're told she doesn't really have the confidence of the party anymore. Can she carry on in the way that she is doing, just keeping her head down and getting on with it?
Well, I think for the time being, that's what she has to do. And yes, she can carry on. The circumstances which make it essential that she carries on as far as the Conservative Party is concerned is that there isn't an obvious successor. This is not a good time for any further instability, both in the party and also in the government, given all of these things that have to be tackled. And it is essential that she has the support now of her ministers and her MPs. I think she has managed to regain some credibility with them as a result of some of the things that she's done over the last few days. And the speech that she made to the 1922 committee, where she talked about contrition, she talked about wanting to serve, having got them into that mess, she was going to get them out of it. I think that was exactly the right tone, and that will have bought her some time.
It's pure gold, Peter Edwards, isn't it, for you and the Labour Party?
Well, we shouldn't look at it quite like that. I mean, Theresa May is clearly a busted flush, but there's obviously a political opportunity for Labour. One can see that Theresa May is burning through her remaining political credibility very quickly. You know, she probably thought on June the 9th, just after the general election, and no landslide, that was as bad as it got. Since then, we've had Grenfell Tower, we've had more uncertainty over Brexit, we've had the first day of Brexit talks, which seemed to be cracking almost from day one, and then we've had that Queen's speech last week, which was gutted, really, with so many things that were in the manifesto and then dropped by the Queen's speech, like the dementia tax and the downgrading of the triple lock and the abolition of free school meals. I've got a list of them, there's so many. So I actually think last week was really a further kind of pinnacle to her humiliation.
In that sense, though, I mean, isn't there's a lot of political games going on, Peter, because you must have been delighted with the Queen's speech. I mean, there was a lot in there that the Labour Party actually supported, wasn't there? Or should have supported.
Well, I don't think we should be delighted with having a weak leader who lacks both confidence in Parliament and in the country. And I don't think we should really celebrate what she's doing wrong, because yes, there's a political gain for Labour, but ultimately it's people's lives around the country that are affected by her weak leadership. And, you know, just one example of that very recently is Grenfell Tower, a strong Prime Minister with an idea of policy and an ability to communicate would have been down at Grenfell very quickly to meet victims and meet the community and send a strong message, whereas in fact we had this kind of drip of a political reaction over several days, and then 5 million of funding actually pushed out on the Friday evening. So it's more than about politics, actually. People's lives are being damaged day by day by this leader.
Joanne, is that something you would concur with? I mean, it's got to be said, it would have been a better show. Certainly it's something like Grenfell, when emotions are understandably absolutely high. And with such a tragedy on this scale, she should have been down there being a bit more human, shouldn't she?
Well, this is what critics are saying, but I think we really need to ask, what do we actually want of a Prime Minister? Do we want somebody who's going to emote for the public, or do we want somebody who's going to get on with the job? Now, we've seen, and I've been critical of her for this, that Mrs May isn't a natural people person. She's quite reserved, she's quite formal. And so in terms of coming out on the spur of the moment with what needs to be said, she may be not the most gifted of politicians. However, I think she's shown a very sober and sensible and reflective approach to what's happened over the last few days. She has met people. And I think she's the sort of person who wouldn't have wanted to be seen to be making political capital out of this event. And turning up and on the day and drawing attention to herself, I think, is something that just would not come naturally to her. And we should remember that when she emerged as the Prime Ministerial candidate only this time a year ago, one of the things that was seen to be in her favour was that she was a discreet grown-up and not somebody who wanted to make a big show of herself. And that seemed to be something that might play as a positive for her. It hasn't done. We've seen that it hasn't done. But we should also, I think, all step back slightly and say, well, do we want showy government at the moment, or do we want somebody that's got to get on with what is obviously a very difficult set of circumstances, and particularly with a very vulnerable government?
Yeah, a final point then, Peter, in all that, and so following from what Joanne says, is it then the right move for the Labour Party, as they've made quite clear, that they just want to topple the government now? They just want to topple the government rather than, I mean, you talk about people's real lives. That wouldn't necessarily be the best thing, would it, to bring about yet more instability by having another general election and a new government in power at this stage?
Well, I don't really agree with that analysis. I don't think Labour purely want to topple the government. They want to protect the British people from some of the regressive effects of Theresa May's Conservative and her policy vacuum. Grenfell was a good example of that, when ultimately we didn't want somewhere down there emoting. We wanted the £5 million relief fund a lot earlier than the Friday. I think for Theresa May, at the end of the day, it comes back to policy. A strong leader is going to get out of a political hole on policy, especially on economic policy. Theresa May doesn't have that. Mayism is a vacuum. Therefore, in the meantime, Labour has to keep up the pressure on the government to get the best deal on Brexit, or for tragedies like Grenfell, or on protecting the NHS for as long as possible. Will an election happen? None of us really know. I don't think it's happening anytime soon. Labour are entirely right to keep pointing out all these mistakes and these U-turns that really reveal the fundamental weakness in Theresa May.
OK, Peter, Joanne, good to get your views this morning. Thanks very much indeed.
Now, coming up after the break, a modelling agency with a difference. We meet Russia's pin-up pensioners.
Great savings in the DFS Price Snap End Monday. The Ripple Corner sofa is now just $1,299, but not for long. DFS.
So we've been speaking all morning about this rather strange modelling agency with a twist. They are getting pensioners to model for them. Many people saying it's a great idea. Let's speak now to Diana Moran, the former model. Thanks for joining us.
Well, we should say, actually, I know you're too young for it, Becky, the Green Goddess. I cannot believe that you're here.
You must have been a little boy bouncing around.
I was quite young. But to see you, I saw you every morning on TV doing your thing in the green leotard.
Thank you.
And can I say, you're still looking fabulous. And every example, I guess, as to why older people and older ladies should be modelling.
Why not? Age is mind over matter, and if you don't mind, it doesn't matter, and that applies to clothes and the way that you live your life as well.
So why is there this, do you think, this focus on youth when it comes to beauty? Because that's what it boils down to, isn't it? To be young is to be beautiful. To be old is not to be beautiful.
We could disagree with that.
Well, absolutely. but that's the general perception.
There has been a huge emphasis on youth over the last, 30, 40 years. I've got my granddaughter actually with me. We were talking downstairs. She's 23 or so. And we were just saying that when I was a model back in the 60s and obviously the 70s as well, we used to, on the catwalk, strutting their stuff, you used to have 2 size 10, 2 size 12, 2 size 14, and then you had 16 and Mrs. Exeter, who was, I think, size 18. So there was somebody that anybody of any size and age could associate with.
You see, size 10 now would be classed as a plus-size model, wouldn't they?
It's ridiculous, isn't it? I mean, people are so stick-thin. And also the models in the windows, in the stores as well, are so thin. Come on, let's get real.
But I think the public have wised up to this.
I mean, they have?
Yes. I mean, if I'm looking at an item of clothing and it's being worn by a teenager, I don't think, oh, that would look good on me. I want to see somebody of my age, my size.
Absolutely, and you should do. And because let's be honest, I'm 78.
Oh, you
and
are?
so, yes, and so somebody of 70 is really like a 50-year-old these days. And people of our age, I mean, life doesn't stop at 60, 65, I can assure you, in all ways. In what you do, I still work very much. I mean, one has romance and all sorts of things like that as well at this age.
Right, too.
And so, we don't put our feet up at 60, 65 and get in the rocking chair. So why not have beautiful clothes to
But
still...
it's got to be good for business as well, hasn't it? I mean, if businesses are appealing to everyone, they're going to make more money, surely.
Of course they are. I have to say that I shop a lot, whoopsie, with online, you know, magazines. What am I trying to say?
Like websites.
Online. I shop online.
Yeah.
And, I mean, that's wonderful because online you can get the sizes that are bigger and they show an illustration of somebody who's bigger wearing the clothes as well.
How much you said earlier on about, you know, it's about how you feel, and I wonder how that that attitude that you have is reflected from what you're doing as the Green Goddess, because obviously a lot of people watching breakfast TV in those days when breakfast TV was brand new and weren't going to look like you, weren't going to necessarily fit into a nice leotard or anything else. Did that matter in terms of what you were doing, or is it just saying it doesn't matter who you are or what you look like, just doing this bit of exercise is a good thing?
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, it's still what I'm saying. I've just written a book. Shall I tell you the title?
Yes,
of it?
please. Why not?
Sod sitting, get moving. It's rather caught the public's imagination, I have to tell you as well, because whatever age you are, any form of movement, moderate exercise, plus, of course, what you're eating, is going to keep you in reasonably good shape. When you exercise, there are the 4 S's: stamina, strength, suppleness and skill. That's body and mind coordination. And the fifth S, could be shape. And so then, if you've got a half-decent shape, then why not dress it
So what's the secret for you? I mean, is it... What's the face cream? I mean, you know...
Oh, I can tell you about the face cream. Am I allowed to mention?
Well, do you know what
Cheap and cheerful. Olay. Always.
And there are other brands.
Always.
But do you know what I wonder is, because we know there's concerns for younger people about body pressure image.
Oh, yes.
And could that translate to if there is more pressure on the older generation to focus on how they look? Is that going to apply pressure to people in their retirement, in their older age?
I'd rather hope that it didn't. I mean, that does distress me for young people as they're growing up, young teenagers, to be pressurised into having the right body shape or hair colour, you know, all that stuff. Yeah. I'd like to think that doesn't happen and that by the time we're older we can see through all of that.
Yeah. Oh, well, let's hope so. Can I just say, it is so lovely to see. I'm so thrilled. I can't believe it. When I saw in the list that Diana's former model, and I thought, it's the Green Goddess. Legendary. It's such a thrill. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
It's made my day this morning. Jo, I'm afraid you're second best now. What's happening with the weather?
Well, you know, we've arranged a personal training session for you after.
Oh, excellent.
We've got your shorts and your trainers. Well, the weather, yes, it's looking really rather unsettled out there. That's all I can say. A little bit cool and showery over Scotland, milder, but with rain in the south.
Jo, thank you. Stay with us here on Sky News. Sophia Ridge is here next, and our main news is those 34 tower blocks failing fire safety tests. Thousands of people spending nights in temporary accommodation.